This faux marble painting technique was part of another project video. It was kind of buried in the middle, and I thought it would work well if I just created a separate video that just covered the technique so that you don't have to watch the other video all the way through or dig around to find it. This way, if you just want to learn the technique, you can. And I have two examples. The one is the original example, which is painting a balustrade with the technique, and the other example is using a three-dimensional item and painting it with the technique. Now on the sides of the garden, I'm using a balustrade that's made out of die-cut chipboard, and I've done a marble paint treatment on it, and so I'm going to show you how I did that. Now what you'll need is just a cup with some water in it to put your paintbrushes in. I use this little lid and have a little water in that. Then I'm using 4 colors. There is kind of 2 different colors of beige. There's a darker one called Butter Pecan. There's a lighter one called Antique White. Then there is a gray, which I'll find that in a second here, and there's warm white, as you can see there. And then there is country gray. Now for this technique you can use however many colors you want. You probably want to at least use 3. And then you can see that I have the whatever surface you want to put these on to work with them. And then in this little cup I have a little bit of white paint, which I'm going to thin just a little bit. Maybe just a little too much. You want it to be thinner than the other paint, the way it comes out of the... So I don't know if you can see that. It almost drips. This might be something that you want to practice a little bit with to get it to the right thickness. We're going to use this one for the veining. And then I have 3 brushes. One brush I'm going to use to apply these colors. One brush I'm going to use to blend the colors. And this brush with a really tiny end to it is going to be used to put the veining on. And then in addition to the brushes, you'll need some just Kleenex, just nice cotton Kleenex. And here I have a piece of it that's going to be used in the front, so this is what we're going to do. And I'm just going to do it on a larger piece of chipboard so that it's easier for you to see how to do it. And you might want to just make up some of these for yourself and practice on them before you paint whatever you're going to paint. Now this technique, you can use it on something as small as the balustrade here, or you can use it on something much larger, like if you like altar books, or if you want to paint your walls, or some decorative piece of furniture, whatever it is, you just scale it up for what we're going to do. So the first thing we're going to do is start by applying. I'm going to get my brush just a little bit wet, and it needs just to be a little damp, not really wet, just damp, so it's not dripping. You know, if I touch it, it's wet, just a little bit wet. Then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to pick up my first color. Does not matter what order, it's all up to you. And I'm going to start making swirls, and I'm going to flip my brush as I do across the white area here. Pick up some more paint, and I'm doing it at a diagonal. And I don't know if you can see how I'm twisting my brush as I pull it across. So you're getting more of a jagged look as opposed to a smooth look. I don't want to paint this, so what you might want to do is start on one side so that you get it to the edge and then go across like that and then come off. And then that way you know you got it all. And this doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to be blended. And there you go. Looks messy, but it'll turn into something like that. So I'm just going to come back in here and make sure my brush is damp again. I don't have to worry about taking color off, nothing like that. I'm just going to take a little of the excess off And then I'm going to come in and grab my next color. So that's on there, and I'm just going to go in the areas that I have not gone in before, and I'm just going to turn and twist, pick up more paint, turn and twist. And you can see I'm running into the other. That's cool too. Turn and twist. The same thing. See? So I'll come back in here, pick up a little bit more water. And now I'm going to come in with the gray. And I like the gray with the beige because it gives you a little contrast, like a darker contrast, so that it's not all beiges. And you do not have to fill in every little space here, just because you're going to blend it, so you don't have to worry if there's a little white. And we actually are going to want some of the white to show up when we're done. Just wherever you want it. Okay, so now we've got our first layer on, or this might be your last layer depending on what you like. And in the meantime, while I'm working, I might need to come back to this to add more color if I want to adjust, so I just leave it in this water so that it doesn't dry out and the paint doesn't stick to the brush. Now I'm going to come in, I'm going to pick up some more water, just like you did before. You just want it a little damp, and now I'm just going to come in here and blend this, and I'm just swirling it. You see how I'm doing this? I'm just kind of like I applied it. But I'm just kind of blending them together. And if you feel like your brush is getting a little dry, pick up a little bit more water. You see I've got paint on it. That's okay. You don't have to take anything off. You're just going for this blended look. A little more paint or a little bit more water. If you do need to wash your brush for some reason, you've got your big container of water. And I'll do that until all the edges are smooth. Now at this point I'm going to come in with a Kleenex and ball it up a little bit, and then I'm going to come in and I'm just going to lightly touch it, very lightly. And do this while the paint is wet, or you won't get any of it to come off into your, so you can see you want a little bit to come up. And you see the real marbly looking effect that we're getting. Now, you look at this and you say, do I like it? Is it good? Well, I'm looking at it, and if you look at my sample, it's got a little too much gray in it. So now I can come back in with my brush again, and I can add more of the other color to kind of damp down the gray. So I'm going to put a little bit more of the lighter color, and I'm going to run it where the gray is. Just so I take that down a bit. Now you could use more than 4 colors, but personally I think it gets a little muddy. And I'm come back in and I'm going to blend a little bit. You see, just swirling it around, twisting it. And come now in and pull a little bit of that off. And now it's not quite as gray as it was. Now I'm going to let that dry, and since you've done this, it shouldn't. Since you've been pulling this off, it shouldn't take too long to do that. You see, we're pulling up enough that I'm actually exposing a little bit of the white, which is good too. So now we'll just let that dry. One more thing I want to mention before we move forward to the veining is that if you're working on something larger, in particular, you want to keep that paint wet until you're done and to this point. Because if you don't keep it wet, then you can't blend it. So either you need to practice this enough where you can work very fast, or you'll need to come back in and go over your lines with just a little bit of wet a little bit of damp brush just to keep it wet. Now you may decide at this point that I like that, I don't want to do anything else. Or you may want to go in and add some fine veining, and that's what we're going to use the white that I have diluted a little bit with water to keep it really wet, and the tiny brush. Now I stand up to do this because I think it just works better, and this has to be a very herky-jerky, not smooth, not swirly motion, and the best way to do that, I think, is to put it in your opposite hand. So don't put it in the hand you normally use, because that will force you to be jerky. So you want to get some paint on your brush, and then you want to come in and just jerk. And I'm telling you, you can't help it. And you're just going to make these weird jerky motions. And you're going to add your veining. And I don't have to do much to jerk like this, just basically try to have some control, and I can't. And then come back in and lift up with your towel or with your Kleenex. And if you want more or you want finer, you know, pick up less paint, just come in. Whoop, don't want that much. And just come in, just add some little stuff. And that way you get a little bit finer. Now at this point, let's say, oh, I hate that. I just hate that. You can come in and start over. You can either add your colors back, you can paint this all white, you can just start over and do something different. And no two will ever come out the same, obviously. They'll always be different. That's another reason to try to work the piece, if you can, as quickly and all at once, so that there's some cohesion in it, so that you don't end up with one section looking totally different than another section. So just continue until you have what you want. If you look here, you can see what I have here. Now when you're working with a piece like this, you're going to want to pretend like it's solid. So you don't want to come in and just do these little things here, or just apply your paint. You want to pretend like this whole thing is solid, and you want to go all the way across, applying your colors, pat all the way across, blend all the way across, and then do your veining all the way across. Otherwise, you're going to get a really funny look. So these, like I say, these open things, just act like this is a solid piece. And then just like you saw at the beginning of this, I would prime whatever you're going to use first with like a white gesso, or I just use white paint, that's fine. Anything that's not going to, so that you have a barrier between your paint and a paper product like this, because if you don't, it's going to just absorb your paint. Your paint won't stay wet, it won't hold its colors. So whatever you're doing, you want to first get, say, a white coat on it, or whatever color. If you want some of the color to kind of come through as you're pulling it up, then use some other color, but just you need a barrier between whatever you're painting and these colors that you're using. So that's it. So this is an example of using the technique on a three-dimensional item, which it's a little bit more complicated than something flat. And the way I approached this is I did it in sections, because it'd be impossible to paint all this and keep it all wet and then be able to handle it as well. So the colors I used on this is I started with this base, like a creamy color. It's called the Antique White, but it has kind of a butter yellow color to it. And then I used this beige called Butter Pecan. And then I used this gray called Pewter Gray. Now I did add a little bit of white in it to just get it a little bit lighter. It was just a little bit too dark, and I didn't have anything a little bit lighter than that. And then the veining is done with a brown here, chocolate sprinkle brown. So started with this. These two are the next ones that I applied, and then this is the veining at the end. So the way I did it is I painted everything. Then I divided it into the front half and the back half. And so I applied my swirly lines, my first two, the gray and the beige, starting from just the inside of the lip over here, going all the way down and just a little bit underneath here. And the thing you have to be careful of is, you know, because this lip, it is easy to skip and not end up with anything in here or anything in here. So you have to be very mindful of that as you're moving your brush down. And then once I got this side where I was happy, I didn't do the veining, just all the other steps. Then I moved and did the other side. Same kind of thing. I did it from that point over to here. And then once I was done with that, I did the inside of the tub. You can see here. Then I let all that dry, and then I came in and did my veining all over the piece. And so a couple things I'll mention about this is this particular tub is made of wood, and the wood was sealed. So I am using acrylic paint on this. So my suggestion is if you do something like that, it will stick, but it could chip off if it's handled. So I would go ahead and seal this and put a seal coat on it. The other thing I did is there's some brass pieces that come on it, the faucets, and then on the sides where the towels are, there's a towel rack. Because I was using acrylic paint, I didn't worry about painting over it because it's very easy to come back in with a Q-tip where you take most of the cotton off of it, so it's very little bit has cotton left, and use that, a Windex and a toothpick to just kind of remove all the paint, because it'd be possible to try to tape this and be able to get the stuff underneath. So that's what a three-dimensional faux paint treatment looks like.